You have small countries, microstates that have done a tremendous job in vaccinating the population, but then you have other countries in Melanesia, like Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu, that are still struggling to get the vaccines into people's arms. And the model that we've worked on at the Lowy Institute shows that this is mostly for two reasons. The first one is misinformation or disinformation that is rampant in those countries, especially in Papua New Guinea, where basically misinformation spreads much faster than the virus itself. And then you have also something that has to do with the health system capacity in those countries. In normal terms, those countries are already struggling with many different types of diseases. And the landing of COVID-19 in the Pacific has shown that, those systems are overwhelmed. And at the moment, you do have a lot of healthcare workers involved in those vaccination rollout, but they are still limited.
What are the main consequences here if some of these countries don't get their vaccination rates up? Yeah,
well, look, the Pacific, most Pacific economies rely heavily on external sources of revenue, such as like tourism, trade, others. And because of this, the only way forward for them is to actually get vaccinated so they can reopen to the world. The thing in those Melanesian countries that we talked about is that some of those countries might not even reach a third of their population being vaccinated by 2026. So this means that they might be close to the world, or it might be very difficult for them to benefit from what the other countries across the Pacific that have already reached full vaccination are going to experience. And this is actually something very important because, again, those countries rely heavily on those external sources of revenues. At the moment, many of those economies have experienced a massive decline in GDP, and the only way forward is to reopen and get vaccinated.
Okay, so what does it mean for the region? What kind of risks does it pose for the broader region, not just these nations individually?
I think, you'll see basically a big divide in the economic recovery of the region by itself. I mean, Papua New Guinea is the biggest economy of the region, right? If this one struggles, then the interconnectedness that this country will have with the rest of the Pacific might struggle. It might be fractured. And this is actually a big risk for the Pacific as a whole region, is that you might see a two-speed recovery, really, where the region will actually be divided and you won't have this kind of, the beauty of the Pacific, the fact that they are acting as one big region. On the international stage, however, a Pacific regionalism is a big issue as well. So you need really all those countries to recover altogether.
Australia is by far the biggest donor of vaccines to the Pacific. So what else can be done here to really shift this?
Yeah, you're right. You're right to highlight that, in the Pacific, vaccines, as we said, is very important. So vaccine supply has been guaranteed not only by Australia, but you're right to highlight that Australia is definitely the biggest contributor to Pacific vaccines, but also by other countries like the United States, New Zealand, that has really taken a big care of its realm countries. And then after you have COVAX. So COVAX was struggling at the beginning, and now it takes up speed and starts to distribute the vaccine all across. But yes, so vaccine supply is not an issue. It's really the vaccine demand. And what my research shows is that there is an issue in the absorption capacity of those countries. So as we said before, misinformation and the stretched health systems. So Australia and other development partners can help to actually improve the situation. First, we need to find ways to counter misinformation. So we could, design with the help of local governments, very well-defined communication strategies on the vaccine to explain how beneficial the vaccine can be for the population. But we also need to identify clearly the channels of communication to transmit this message. So it could be through the churches, through sport athletes, through politicians. I mean, there is a lot that needs to be analyzed and studied on the best way to communicate this. And then after, there is the boosting of health systems capacity. Increasing the numbers of vaccinators or making it more efficient. Because at the moment, this is what's happening, right? In some countries like Vanuatu, you have enough vaccinators, but sometimes like the organization of those vaccinators, like the spreading across the country of those vaccinators, it lacks efficiency. And so you want to be sure that you're providing enough vaccines to all the people that really need it, and they need to be disbursed or distributed, in a timely and efficient way.
So you're basically saying, yes, we might be sending out the vaccines, but we need to be actually investing on the people on the ground to counter the misinformation. That's kind of equally important.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, we do have a huge stock of vaccine in Australia, right? I guess maybe the silver lining of us in Australia being reticent in taking the AstraZeneca vaccine is that now we have a huge stock that we can actually send to developing countries, to low-income countries over the Pacific. And so yes, vaccine supply is not an issue. Now, we need to invest in the people-to-people connection, as you clearly said. And we need to invest in developing the capacity. And I think actually this is very important for Australia. We are facing the risk of seeing new strains of Delta variant emerging from Papua New Guinea if we don't do anything. Papua New Guinea is so close to Australia. This is our closest neighbor. And it wouldn't take much really for a more virulent and more transmissible virus to actually just cross the border and make its way to Australia.